For 13 years since we got married, I've been making lunch boxes for my husband, Tom, every single day. Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious as always. Hearing those words every day and seeing the empty lunch box he brought back home were small things that made me happy. The sandwiches I made for lunch were something special that connected Tom and me. Dad's going to eat the sandwich, so I'll make the tuna salad for it today. Recently, even our daughter, Maria, started helping me prepare the lunch boxes, making the sandwiches even more filled with love. Then one day, while having a late breakfast, I took a bite of the tuna salad Maria had made that morning. What? It's sweet! I couldn't help but shout out loud, because it was just so sweet. When I looked at the kitchen counter, I noticed the sugar and salt jars had been switched. Why didn't I taste it before putting it in the lunchbox? Tom always looks forward to those sandwiches, so I felt bad for letting him down. Guilt weighed on me all day. That evening, as soon as Tom got home, I started to bring up the sandwiches. But the words Tom said next completely caught me off guard. Thanks as always. My coworkers are always jealous of me. He said this as he handed over his lunchbox, just like usual. His comment left me puzzled, but I set the thought aside and started doing the dishes. As I opened his lunchbox, I noticed something unusual. I couldn't shake off this strange feeling I had. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious it seemed. Later that night, when Tom and Maria were fast asleep, I quietly slipped out of the house. An hour later, my name is Sarah. I live with my husband, Tom, who works in an office, and our 11-year-old daughter, Maria. Actually, my family runs a well-known family restaurant in town. I started helping out in the kitchen during my school days and have continued working there ever since. Our restaurant also offers takeout, and thankfully, the sandwiches I make have a loyal following. Looking back about 15 years ago, Tom was one of the biggest fans of my sandwiches, coming by 2 or 3 times a week. Whenever I eat one of these sandwiches, I feel motivated to work harder, he said once, with a warm smile. That smile left a deep impression on me, and I remember how radiant he looked. Gradually, I found myself drawn to him, and we eventually started dating. Tom's parents had already passed away by then. Apparently, he didn't have fond feelings for his family. As a result, he rarely talked about them. Everyone has things they don't want to talk about, right? That's what I thought, so I never pushed Tom to share. But as the years went by, Tom started to open up about his family, bit by bit. Once, I jokingly said, "You don't have to praise my cooking so much," because he complimented it so often. That was the first time he told me about his mother. Apparently, his mom wasn't good at cooking. He grew up on convenience store sandwiches and frozen meals, and never really knew what a mother's home-cooked meal was. "That's why I was so captivated by your sandwiches, Sarah." He said that with his usual calm smile, but I thought I saw a hint of sadness in his eyes. In that moment, I loved him even more deeply. About 2 years into our relationship, he proposed to me. "I want you to make sandwiches for me every day." The line was so unusual that I couldn't help but laugh. That's how our newlywed life began. Here you go. Another sandwich for today. Thanks. I can't wait for lunch. Making sandwiches for him transitioned from being part of my work at the restaurant to a daily routine at home. As the daughter of a well-known family restaurant, my sandwiches became the envy of his coworkers early in our marriage. Everyone's always asking me to share. They want the sandwiches and you, but I told them, both are mine. Seeing Tom share those stories with such enthusiasm made me feel proud as well. It gave me motivation to keep doing my best every day. Every time he said something like that, I felt a renewed sense of determination. When we got married, I decided to shorten my working hours. I wanted to welcome Tom home with a warm meal ready for him. That was how I felt. It wasn't something he wished for, but something I wanted to do. As I spent more time with Tom, I realized how strongly he longed for a close, loving family. One reason for this, I believe, was his father. His father was a serious police officer, respected for his dedication at work, but at home, he was a strict and domineering presence. When his father came home, the entire house would grow tense. Even when the family gathered, the atmosphere was cold and eerily silent. During meals, they only moved their forks mechanically, with no conversation. On top of that, the food was always the same convenience store sandwiches or frozen meals, offering no variety. There was no joy in tasting something delicious together as a family. Instead, they sat with their heads down, simply waiting for the time to pass. I used to be so scared whenever Dad was about to come home, Tom admitted. His mother simply followed his father's lead, leaving no room for happy family memories. I thought to myself, so there are families like that. I grew up in a household where talking and laughing over meals was just normal, even on the busiest days. When he first told me about his upbringing, I was deeply shocked. Tom's love for my sandwiches made so much more sense after that. Because of this, I cherished our family dinners whenever Tom came home. We would sit together, share stories about our day, and laugh. Those moments were precious to me. Today, my boss told me, "That presentation you gave the other day was perfect. Looks like my reputation just went up again." The other day, a coworker messed up at work, and I had to clean up the mess. What if my reputation takes a hit because of that? Tom often shared the challenges he faced at work. He was always very sensitive to praise and how others perceived him. Sometimes, I wondered if his need for approval came from the influence of his serious father. But he worked hard, and it rarely affected our family life. I never felt dissatisfied with Tom. "Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious as always." Hearing those words every day and seeing the empty lunchbox he brought back home was my happiness. Another empty lunchbox today. He enjoyed it again. "That's good," I'd think to myself as I washed it. Knowing that my sandwiches might have supported Tom through his day made my heart warm and full. But about a year ago, he started coming home late more often. Now, half the week, he comes home late, reheats his cold dinner, and eats alone. Even after finishing his meal, he doesn't talk much and goes straight to the shower before heading to bed. For someone who used to care so much about spending time as a family. On top of that, overnight work trips, which were rare before, have become more frequent. These trips are often planned at the last minute, leaving the meals I carefully prepared to go to waste. As someone whose work revolves around cooking, there's nothing more painful than seeing food I've made with love left uneaten. And lately, he has even started taking his smartphone into the shower. "Tom, are you hiding something?" I found myself starting to doubt him. Still, my routine of making Tom sandwiches remained unchanged. "Thanks for today," he'd say as he left for work, and I'd watch him go, feeling a strong desire to trust him. The sandwiches that connected us. As long as this routine continued, I told myself that our love continued too. I kept repeating those words to convince myself. And then, one day, like always, I handed Tom his sandwich that morning. But today's sandwich was special. Would Tom notice? I waited eagerly for him to come home, excited to see his reaction. I was so eager that I even went to the front door to greet him as soon as he arrived. "Thanks as always." The sandwich was delicious today, too, but his reaction was just the same as usual. I couldn't hide my disappointment. Really? Didn't you notice anything different about the sandwich? Huh? What do you mean? He mumbled. It tasted the same as always, while setting down his bag. Dad, how could you not notice? Maria's frustrated voice suddenly came from the sofa, where she had apparently been listening to our conversation. She leaned forward, looking upset. I made today's sandwich. I worked so hard on it. That's right. Today's sandwich wasn't made by me. It was Maria's creation. She had learned how to make sandwiches in her school class the day before. Maria had been showing an interest in cooking recently, and had been helping me in the kitchen every day. Yesterday, she declared that she wanted to make Tom's sandwich herself. I wonder if Dad will notice. Mom, don't tell him, okay? All right, all right. But Tom has been eating my sandwiches for years. I'm sure he'll notice. That morning, as we packed the sandwich together, we exchanged mischievous smiles. Wow, I didn't notice at all. It tasted just like Sarah's. You've got talent, Maria. After a brief pause, Tom praised Maria enthusiastically and patted her on the head. Maria's face lit up with pride as she beamed with joy. Guess what? I learned how to make it in school yesterday. Maria began explaining confidently, and Tom nodded along as he listened. I watched the scene unfold with a smile, but a strange feeling began to stir inside me. Normally, he would notice, right? Sure, I helped Maria a little. But she's only 11 years old, and has only made sandwiches a handful of times in her life. The shape and taste were completely different from the ones I've been making for years. I have my own meticulous approach to making sandwiches, and I take pride in what I've created over time. Maria's sandwiches, on the other hand, followed a simple recipe she learned at school, straightforward and basic. Neither is better or worse. They each have their own charm and uniqueness. That's why I was so confident when I told Maria that Tom would notice. What is this feeling? It's not sadness or frustration. I couldn't quite understand it myself. Maybe that's just how men are. He said it was delicious, so I shouldn't overthink it. I tried to convince myself and let it go. I'll make Dad's sandwich again today. After that, Maria made sandwiches for Tom a few more times. She must have been thrilled by Tom's compliments. One day, after sending off Tom and Maria, I sat down for a late breakfast. I took a bite of the tuna salad Maria had made that morning. What? It's sweet. The taste was so overwhelmingly sweet that I couldn't help but exclaim out loud. I had taught Maria how to measure ingredients and match the flavors to mine, and she had been doing it perfectly until now. Then I noticed something odd in the kitchen. The sugar and salt jars had been switched. Oh, Maria. She must have been relying on the placement of the containers instead of reading the labels. Why didn't she taste it before using it? Tom always looks forward to the sandwiches, so I felt terrible for messing up. I was filled with guilt toward Tom. I couldn't help but imagine him making a funny face while eating it right now. I'll apologize when he gets home. I usually pride myself on his lunchbox coming back empty, but today might be an exception. I couldn't stop thinking about it throughout the day, making it hard to focus on work. Then that evening, I thought Tom would surely say something, so as soon as he got home, I started to say about today's sandwich. But the words Tom said right away were completely unexpected. Oh, thank you as always. Everyone at work envies me every time. He thanked me like usual and handed me his lunchbox before setting down his bag. It was such an ordinary scene, almost too ordinary. It didn't feel like the kind of remark meant to spare my feelings after what I assumed was a disastrous mistake with the tuna salad. Right. Feeling a sense of unease, I opened his lunchbox while getting ready to do the dishes. Wait, what's this? I noticed something strange. Since Maria started helping with the sandwiches, she said she wanted to make the lunchbox look cuter. To make her happy, we bought adorable food pics together. When Maria helped, she would enthusiastically use them, creating cute, decorative lunchboxes that always made her proud. Honestly, I thought she overused them sometimes, but it wasn't something I would have come up with myself. And as long as it made Maria and Tom happy, I didn't mind. I distinctly remembered seeing those food pics in the lunchbox this morning, but now they were gone. When I made the sandwiches alone, I never used a cute food pics, so I had never felt anything unusual about washing an empty lunchbox before. But thinking about it now, it seemed odd. Would Tom throw them away after eating? Why would he do that? What would be the point? Could it be he's throwing the sandwiches away? For a brief moment, the thought crossed my mind, and suddenly, all the little things I'd noticed but ignored over time came rushing back to me. The conversations I had with Tom and Maria that day, the shows playing on TV, they all slipped past me, barely registering. When Tom and Maria had gone to bed, I stayed up like usual to prep for tomorrow's sandwiches. I liked the quiet time at night, working alone in the dimly lit kitchen. It was my moment to reflect on the day and focus on my tasks. The sound of the knife against the cutting board echoed in the empty room, a rhythm I found oddly soothing. And when the prep was done, the sense of accomplishment filled me with satisfaction. But tonight, I didn't feel like myself. Maybe some fresh air would help. I decided to step outside for a bit. Carefully, I slipped out of the house, making sure to close the front door slowly and quietly so as not to wake Tom or Maria. The cold air brushed against my skin as I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs with its refreshing chill. I walked aimlessly, unsure of where to go. It had been years since I last walked outside so late at night. Since getting married and having Maria, I hadn't done something like this in years. That thought crossed my mind as I stepped into a convenience store. I didn't have anything specific I needed. I just wandered over to the magazine section and picked up a weekly tabloid without thinking. As I flipped through the pages, one word caught my eye: affair. The moment I saw it, a pang of pain shot through my chest. Recently, Tom's behavior had planted a seed of suspicion in my heart, but I had never found the courage to confirm it. The thought that Tom might be betraying me was too much to bear. I wasn't ready to accept such a painful reality, so I had chosen to turn a blind eye. After all, if I didn't know the truth, I wouldn't have to face the pain. I told myself that to protect my heart, but as I stood there, I started reflecting. For 13 years of marriage, Tom had almost always come home on time. Then, all of a sudden, he started coming home late. Overnight work trips, which had been rare, suddenly became frequent. He now never let go of his smartphone, even when he went to the shower or the bathroom. And then there was the possibility that he might be throwing away the sandwiches. As the memories resurfaced, my heart grew heavier. The more I thought about it, the tighter the knot in my chest became. Could Tom really be? That thought crossed my mind, and my eyes filled with tears. A quiet fear started to spread in my heart, the fear that everything we had built was slowly crumbling away. Suddenly, the quiet of the store was pierced by the sound of ringtone. At the same time, my smartphone vibrated in my pocket. Who could be calling at this hour? Startled, I checked the screen. It was Maria. Did I wake her up? I thought I'd been quiet when I left the house. Hurrying out of the store, I answered the call. Maria, I'm sorry, did I wake you? I just remembered I forgot to pick up something, so I came to the convenience store. I'm heading home now. I assumed she'd ask where I was, so I quickly reassured her before she could say anything. But the next words Maria spoke shook me to my core. "Mom, Dad is cheating on you." Time stopped. Her words echoed in my mind over and over, like ringing in my ears. "How do you know that?" My voice trembled as I forced the question out, and Maria hesitated before she began explaining. It happened when Maria went to the shopping mall with her friends. She saw Tom walking hand in hand with a woman she didn't know, along with a boy who seemed to be her son. At first, she thought she must have been mistaken, but as she looked closer, she realized it was undeniably her father, Tom. Maria said she had thought about telling me but didn't know how to say it. At one point, she even considered pretending it never happened and forgetting the whole thing. "But lately, you've seemed troubled, Mom. I wondered if it was because you noticed something about Dad. I didn't want to see you struggling anymore, so I decided to tell you. I had thought I'd been hiding my feelings well, that neither Maria nor Tom had noticed my unease. But Maria had seen right through me. She had been waiting for the right moment to tell me. And the sound of me leaving the house late at night spurred her to act. She said she was so worried that she decided to call me right away." Her voice trembled slightly, but I could feel her courage through the phone. She had mustered all her strength to share this with me. "That's why I've been helping you make Dad sandwiches lately. I thought if we combined our love into them, maybe it would make him come back to us. I really tried my best, but I guess it wasn't enough. I'm sorry, Mom." Maria's voice was filled with guilt. So that's why she had been so eager to help with the sandwiches. I was stunned by Maria's maturity and thoughtfulness. And then the tears I had been holding back began to flow uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry. How could I let an 11-year-old carry such a heavy secret, worrying and taking care of me all this time?" The guilt weighed on my chest, and all I could do was apologize. After hanging up the phone, I sat quietly until I calmed down. I couldn't let this continue. I had to take action. I decided to gather evidence of Tom's affair. The detective I hired later provided me with a report that revealed several details. The woman's name was Anne. She was a divorced single mother raising her son alone. She had been working as a temp at Tom's company for about 2 years. They had started their relationship approximately a year ago. Now he was even spending time with Anne's son, going out together as a trio. The report included photos of Tom meeting Anne multiple times, secret rendezvous at hotels and restaurants, laughing and playing as if they were a real family at shopping malls and parks. Seeing his smiling face, so carefree and happy, felt like looking at a stranger. It was excruciating. So it was true. I felt something inside me collapse, as if a part of me had shattered. My chest tightened painfully, but at the same time, there was a part of me that accepted it calmly. Deep down, I must have sensed all along that it would come to this. We have Maria, a treasure in our lives, and yet he chose to betray us for his own selfish desires. I couldn't forgive him. A strong resolve took root in my heart. On a night when Tom was staying out, I took the day off from work and headed to a particular apartment. How many sleepless nights had I endured to gather the courage to come here? My fingers trembled, and sweat clung to my palms. I climbed the dimly lit staircase and stood in front of the door. Behind this door was the person who had destroyed my family. I already knew her name, her face, and the moments she had shared with Tom. But standing here, knowing she was just behind this door, anger and emptiness swirled within me. "Calm down. Breathe." After taking a deep breath, I pressed the doorbell. Yes, the woman who opened the door was unmistakably Anne, Tom's mistress. Can I help you?" Anne's demeanor was unexpectedly composed, her expression calm and collected. What is this reaction? Is she trying to act indifferent? Her attitude only fueled my anger further. Suppressing the tremor in my voice, I spoke in a low and firm tone. I'm Tom's wife. Anne's face turned pale, her eyes widening in shock. Her lips quivered, and she stood frozen, staring at me in silence. I'm coming in. Pushing past her, I stepped into the apartment. Inside the apartment, what met my eyes was Tom, playing with a boy who looked like he was in kindergarten. Sarah, what are you doing here? Tom, completely caught off guard, shouted loudly and froze in place. The boy standing next to him, startled, ran over to Anne. Anne softly called out, "Sam," and embraced the boy tightly. Turning to Anne, I spoke. "Sorry for showing up so suddenly. My name is Sarah, and I'm Tom's wife. I've investigated everything about you. I have all the evidence I need. You're Anne, the woman Tom has been having an affair with, right?" "Yes." I had no idea he was married. I didn't know. Anne's voice was very soft, and she looked at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. "We've been married for 13 years. We have an 11-year-old daughter. Did Tom never tell you?" Hearing this, Anne looked even more devastated and lowered her head in despair. She quickly turned to glare at Tom. "Tom, you never told me you were married. I asked if you were seeing anyone, and you said no. Well, I mean, you only asked if I had a girlfriend. You didn't specifically ask if I had a wife, so I didn't say anything." Tom stammered, scrambling for excuses. From their exchange, it was clear that she genuinely hadn't known about Tom's wife and child. After a heated argument between the two, Anne turned to me, her shoulders trembling, and apologized deeply. "I'm so sorry, truly. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't know Tom had a wife." Her voice was shaky and tinged with tears, and she repeated her apologies softly over and over. As I watched her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for Anne. "Anne, please stop apologizing. Your child is here today, so let's discuss this further at a later time." Anne nodded repeatedly, tears welling up in her eyes. We agreed to meet that weekend, and I decided to leave for the day. Tom, on the other hand, sighed loudly and sat there shaking his leg, showing no sign of remorse. From that day on, Tom and I stopped speaking. I no longer made his lunchbox or cooked for him. Although we lived under the same roof, it felt like we were already separated. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. "Hello." Anne came to our house, looking visibly nervous. She had likely arranged for someone to look after her son, as she came alone. Maria was out playing with friends, so it was just me, Tom, and Anne in the house. Tom lounged silently on the couch, showing no hint of guilt. How could he, the one most at fault, be acting so annoyed? Suppressing my frustration, I looked Anne in the eye and spoke clearly. "Anne, thank you for coming today. I want to talk about your relationship with Tom." "Understood. I'll tell you everything honestly today." Anne's eyes reflected a determined resolve. She began to recount her story with Tom, starting from how they met. Anne had joined Tom's department 2 years ago as a temporary employee. At first, their conversations were limited to work matters. She only saw Tom as a reliable supervisor and had no special feelings for him. Every day during lunch, Anne would take out her homemade lunchbox and eat at her desk. Although there were many others in their department, most of them went to the cafeteria or outside for lunch, leaving only Anne and Tom at their desks. "Anne, you bring a lunchbox too. It looks delicious. Do you make it yourself?" "Yes, I love cooking." That simple exchange led to the two of them eating lunch together daily. I'd love to try one of your lunch boxes, Tom had said one day. Encouraged by his words, Anne started making lunch boxes for Tom. And before long, their relationship turned romantic. Throughout their time together, Tom never gave her any indication that he was married or had a family, leaving no reason for her to doubt him. Her only son had grown very fond of Tom, and Anne had believed their relationship was going well. That day when I visited, she learned the truth. Sarah, I didn't know. I had no idea I was doing something that would destroy a family. I'm truly sorry. I'll make sure to pay full compensation. I can't promise to pay it all at once, but I swear I'll pay it, no matter how long it takes, Anne said earnestly. Her words seemed genuine, devoid of any schemes or pretense. What about you, Tom? Do you have anything to say? I turned my gaze to Tom, who sat on the couch, sulking with a disgruntled expression, and asked. Tom let out a deep sigh and said, Sarah, I'm tired of your sandwiches. Anne's lunch boxes are completely different. Honestly, I've been throwing yours away every day. In the early days of our marriage, my lunch boxes had been admired as gourmet creations from the daughter of a famous restaurant owner. Tom would proudly talk about how his coworkers praised them, likely feeding his ego. But as time went on, the admiration from others faded. As time went on, Tom gradually lost interest in my sandwiches and grew tired of them. Even though I changed the ingredients daily, the care and attention I put into them made the sandwiches feel restrictive to him. In contrast, Anne's lunch boxes were simple, hearty, and full of familiar, comforting flavors. They had a warmth that reminded Tom of the motherly love he had secretly longed for as a child. From the time Tom began eating Anne's lunch boxes, he admitted he had been throwing my sandwiches away at the end of every lunch break. The fact that he had been discarding my sandwiches pierced my heart deeply. I had suspected it, in a way, but hearing it confirmed brought not only anger but also profound sadness. For months, the sandwiches I poured my love into had simply been thrown away without a second thought. It was as if Tom was declaring that the care and affection I put into them held no value to him. And it wasn't just about the sandwiches. Tom's complaints didn't stop there. And another thing, Sarah, you've always been full of yourself because your family's restaurant is well known. You act so high and mighty. Tom seemed to resent that I, working at my family's well-known restaurant, enjoyed higher social standing than he did. In reality, I earned more than Tom, and the house was under my name, so my opinions often carried more weight in our household. Sarah, you're the daughter of that famous restaurant, right? Their food is incredible. That's amazing. People from Tom's company and our neighborhood often praised me exclusively. It must have bothered Tom deeply. In the midst of that, Anne's admiration for him must have shone brightly in his eyes. Tom was a full-time employee, while Anne was a temp worker. She frequently relied on him at work and expressed her gratitude, boosting his sense of importance. In their private life, Tom always took the lead in conversations. Their activities and destinations were decided based on his suggestions. Anne, ever modest, simply followed along, trailing after him. This dynamic seemed to fill the void in Tom's self-esteem, restoring a confidence he felt he had lost as a man. How foolish he was, sacrificing so much for such a fragile sense of validation. I was utterly exasperated. Tom's immaturity, seeking to satisfy his unfulfilled ego through Anne and betrayal, seemed utterly ridiculous to me. After hearing everything, I had made my decision. Divorce. Mom, do whatever feels right for you. I'll stay with you, Maria had said when I talked to her about it. Her warm, supportive words gave me the strength I needed. Tom, Let's get a divorce, I said, pulling out the divorce papers and placing them on the table. They were already partially filled out. I'm sick of your sandwiches anyway. This works out perfectly, Tom scoffed. He snatched the pen from me and immediately started signing the papers. There wasn't a hint of regret or remorse in his expression. If anything, he looked relieved, almost as though this was what he had wanted all along. After signing, he tossed the papers and pen onto the table and stood up abruptly. There, happy now? A bossy woman like you. No man wants that. Men like women who take care of them. Women like you will never be chosen. Tom spat out those bitter parting words. He was still saying something in the end. But at this point, I didn't care anymore. I had no desire to argue back. Anne, let's go, Tom said, turning to her with a satisfied smirk and extending his hand. Anne hesitated, her hand hovering uncertainly. As she started to reach for his hand, Tom shot me a triumphant look. I'll marry Anne right away. Poor Sarah, left all alone. What a lucky break for me to get out of this so easily, Tom gloated. But then, a sharp sound broke the air, and Tom's expression twisted in confusion. Anne had slapped his hand away. Shocked, Tom and I both turned to look at her. Her eyes glared at Tom with disgust, as though she were looking at something repulsive. What? Marry you? Don't make me laugh. I told you my ex-husband cheated on me, and how much I despise infidelity, and yet you still cheated with me. I hate myself for not realizing sooner. I never imagined Anne had such a painful past. To have been cheated on, divorced, and forced to navigate the challenges of being a single mother, her life must have been full of hardship. She probably carried deep emotional scars from her previous relationship, finally allowing herself to love again, only to unknowingly become someone's mistress. I couldn't imagine enduring such a thing. As I watched her, the anger I initially felt toward Anne began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of sympathy. I was going to tell you. I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I'm divorcing her now. Tom desperately tried to justify himself, but Anne's response was resolute. I could never trust a man who so easily abandons his wife and child. I despise you, Tom. Goodbye. Anne turned her back on Tom and headed toward the door. Tom, however, grabbed her arm, repeating his excuses. I would never do that to you, Anne. I love you more than anything. But Anne remained unmoved. She refused to listen. My next words, however, seemed to deliver the final blow to Tom. Oh, by the way, Maria has a message for you. She says there's no more lunchbox coming for you. So don't bother coming back. And by the way, you'll need to pack your things and leave. This house is in my name. Hearing this, Tom let go of Anne's arm and slumped into a chair, completely defeated. After Tom left the house, I found myself alone with Anne. I'm so sorry, truly. I'm so sorry, Anne said, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. It was as though she had finally let her guard down, and she repeated her apologies over and over. She had been hurt by Tom's betrayal as well. She seemed unsure of how to process the painful truth she had just learned. This ordeal hadn't only wounded me, she was a victim too. And I'm going through with the divorce, but I'm sorry for the trouble Tom has caused you. I plan to seek compensation from him, but I won't be asking you for anything. Please use your resources for your son. I gently placed a hand on Anne's shoulder as I said this. Anne looked at me with wide eyes, seemingly stunned. No, I can't allow that. These things need to be handled properly, she insisted, clearly determined not to evade responsibility. Having experienced infidelity herself, Anne likely understood the gravity of the situation all too well. If that's the case, I had an idea. I proposed an alternative to financial compensation to Anne. At first, she seemed surprised, but after thinking it over, she agreed. A few days later, I filed the divorce papers. Rumors quickly spread at Tom's workplace about how he had an affair with a temp worker despite being married with a child. Unable to face his colleagues, he resigned a few months later. Only once after the divorce did I receive a message from Tom. The content, the affair, Tom wrote, had been just a meaningless fling. He claimed to be deeply sorry for what he had done to Maria and me, and expressed genuine regret. He mentioned he was trying to find a new job, but had been struggling, surviving on temporary work to make ends meet. His message detailed his remorse and current hardships, but my feelings remained untouched. Every word of his apology felt hollow, as if it lacked any real substance. "This is your responsibility." That's all I could think. At the end of the message, Tom wrote, "I still love you, Sarah. Will you make me those sandwiches again?" The sandwiches that had once connected us, he had the nerve to bring them up now of all times. After everything he had done, did he truly believe those words would sway me? I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply exasperated. I quietly set my smartphone aside and chose to ignore his message. I had no intention of involving myself with Tom ever again. As for Anne, that day, I made her an unusual proposal. Instead of compensation, "Would you teach me how to cook?" The only cooking I knew was what I had learned at my family's restaurant. For me, that was home cooking, filled with my mother's love. I took pride in it, and I had never felt ashamed of it. Still, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly were the homely meals that had captivated Tom so much. It was a simple curiosity, nothing more. So Anne and I began cooking together at my house a few times, and during those sessions, we shared many conversations. Her experiences of being cheated on, her life as a single mother, her love for cooking. It turned out we shared not only similar struggles, but also many other commonalities. Naturally, we became friends. Nowadays, Maria and Anne's son, Sam, have joined in as well. The four of us regularly get together, cooking meals, or preparing lunch boxes for picnics. "Sam, let's play with the blocks over here." "Okay, let's play." Maria doted on Sam like a big sister, and Sam adored her in return. A few months later, Sarah, about tomorrow's lunch boxes. At the time of her contract renewal, Anne left her temp job and started working at my family's restaurant. As she taught me her recipes, I found myself drawn to her culinary talent. Her familiar flavors, creativity, and knack for unique combinations were captivating. I became convinced that she could bring something new and exciting to the restaurant, and I recruited her to join us. As expected, Anne picked things up quickly, mastering our recipes in no time. She's already becoming a valuable member of the team. These days, I'm deeply immersed in developing new menu items for the restaurant. Every time I step into the kitchen, I feel a mix of anticipation and joy, a reminder of how much I love cooking. When I come home from work, Maria greets me with a big smile. "Mom, welcome home. I finished my homework. What are we making for dinner tonight?" Although I no longer make lunch boxes, Maria helps me prepare dinner nearly every evening now. Her seasoning has gotten so much better. As we enjoy a delicious meal together, Maria shares stories about her school and friends with bright enthusiasm. Surrounded by lively sounds and comforting aromas, my day ends peacefully. These moments at the dinner table with her are a precious treasure.
I had just finished dinner alone and was getting ready for bed while watching my favorite drama on TV when suddenly, I heard a loud banging on the front door. To check what was going on, I quickly put on a light jacket, changed from slippers to sandals, and walked to the door, asking, "Who is it?" without opening it. Then, from the pitch black, stormy night outside, I barely heard a voice saying, "Grandma." It was the voice of my grandchild, Emily. As soon as I opened the front door, I saw Emily standing there, tears streaming down her face. I quickly pulled her into the house to shield her from the strong night wind and calmed her down before asking what had happened. It was clear that something urgent had brought her to my house alone at such a late hour. Even though I was worried about her little body being out in the strong wind, I wrapped her in a blanket to warm her up and listened to her story. "Emily, what happened? Why are you here alone at this hour? Where's your mom?" Mom isn't moving. She collapsed." Upon hearing that, I couldn't sit still and drove Emily to her mother's house to check on her. As Emily led me to the living room, I immediately saw Grace lying on the floor. "Grace? Grace! Emily, where's your dad?" In this situation, there's no way her husband, Bobby, wouldn't be around. "Dad hit Mom, then left the house, saying she'd wake up soon. Then he went to work." Hearing that, a shock like lightning ran through my body. "Mrs. White. Mrs. White. Mrs. Frances White. Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm coming." In the waiting room of our regular hospital, whether on weekdays or weekends, it's always crowded, which naturally means long waiting times. Usually, I kill time with the numerous magazines and TV provided by the hospital, but once those become boring, there's nothing left to do but wait. In such times, the only way to pass the time is to use my phone. I used to read the news, but lately, I've been obsessed with something Grace introduced to me: social media. As a result, I sometimes miss the nurse calling my name. "Mrs. White, thank you for coming to your regular checkup. Your health seems fine. By the way, I heard from the nurse that you've been quite into social media lately." "Yes, that's right. Grace taught me about it." The reason I started using social media. It wasn't just because Grace told me it was fun, it was also because the man Grace married happens to be a somewhat famous influencer. Before getting married, Grace had no interest in social media, and she would often wonder aloud during our lunchtime variety shows why it was so popular. However, when the topic of marriage or relationships came up on the show, her demeanor would change. She used to laugh along, but suddenly, she'd sigh and look at the magazines on the table. Grace had a history of dating several men, but none of those relationships led to marriage. Each one ended within 3 years, and she often lamented her bad luck with men. But recently, those complaints have stopped, and she avoids marriage-related topics on TV or in magazines, almost as if she's unconsciously blocking them out. Has she given up on marriage, or has she grown tired of the idea? Seeing Grace react so strongly against marriage makes it difficult for me to ask if she's met anyone new recently. Despite this, I still want Grace to marry and build a happy family. I wish for this because my own marriage with my late husband was so happy, and I want Grace to find the same kind of happiness. However, as a parent, I don't want to force it upon her. I wish there was a good way to help. Thinking about all this, it was time for my regular hospital visit. I took an eco bag with me to stop by the grocery store on the way back. As I checked in and waited in the reception area for my turn, I overheard a small conversation between the receptionists. Usually, I wouldn't pay attention, but today, for some reason, I found myself intrigued by their conversation. They were talking about something that had been on TV lately: dating apps. "I was so desperate for a boyfriend that I finally tried a dating app." "What? You hadn't tried one yet?" "I've been using one for a while now." I knew about dating apps from TV, but I didn't understand how they worked or how people met through them. Curious, I looked up dating apps on my phone. This is it. I couldn't sit still, even though my turn might be called any moment, so I asked the receptionist to explain dating apps to me. I left the hospital and, forgetting all about dinner shopping, went straight home. Grace, who had taken the day off to clean the house, looked puzzled as she saw me return empty-handed, despite saying I'd stop by the grocery store after my appointment. "Mom, you said you were going to the grocery store. Why did you come back with nothing? Did you forget your wallet?" "Grace, why don't you try a dating app?" "What?" Grace never expected her mom to suggest a dating app. However, as I saw Grace's face, she didn't seem like she had completely given up on marriage. She looked almost cheerful. Although she initially said no, as I kept talking about the app and sharing stories from the receptionists about how they met their boyfriends, I could see Grace's expression change, showing clear interest. After dinner, I went to the bathroom. When I came back to the living room, I caught a glimpse of Grace's phone screen. It seemed she had downloaded the dating app while I was in the bathroom and was setting it up. Noticing my presence, Grace quickly hid her phone and gave me a suspicious look as I grinned. "What's with that look?" "I didn't start it because you suggested it. I had been curious about it for a while." Sure, I get it. So, have you found anyone interesting yet?" "Well, it's not that easy. I just started." Even though she seemed skeptical, Grace's face looked happy as she used the app, which made me feel cheerful too. A week later. Friday evening. As I was preparing dinner, Grace came home from work, threw her bags at the door, and rushed over to show me her phone. "Mom, what should I do? I've been asked out on a date." She had matched with a man on the dating app one suggested, and he had asked her out for a date this Sunday. Surprised and happy, I decided to make Grace's favorite meal to celebrate and boost her spirits for the upcoming date. The big day arrived. Grace pulled out stylish clothes and accessories she hadn't worn since she stopped dating, put on perfect makeup for the first time in ages, and, with trembling hands from nervousness, headed out for her date. As I watched her leave, I could only hope for a good outcome. That night, my heart wouldn't stop pounding, and I ended up drinking alone for the first time in years to calm my nerves and fall asleep. When I woke up, sunlight was peeking through the curtains. I went to check Grace's room, but she wasn't back yet. It was just before 6 a.m. I remembered Grace telling me she had taken the morning off, and thinking she might be in the arms of her date now brought back the same excitement I felt while watching a drama. I had an early breakfast while watching the morning entertainment show, did some chores, and waited for Grace to come home. After a while, Grace came back home, and from the sparkle in her eyes, I could tell her date was a success. She noticed me, flashed a V sign without saying a word, and then headed to the bathroom for a shower before her afternoon work started. "That's great, Grace." After that, Grace had a serious relationship with the man she dated and got married a year later. The man she brought home to introduce to me before their marriage was someone who had recently become famous for his social media streaming, and although I wasn't very familiar with the internet, he was apparently quite a well-known figure. At first, I was a bit worried about whether his job could really support a family, but as soon as I heard about his income from Grace, all my concerns vanished. "Bobby's job brings in that much income?" I'm surprised. Grace hadn't expected to connect with a famous influencer through a dating app either, and she mentioned how surprised she was when she heard about his job from him. They had a grand wedding, which Bobby posted about on his social media, drawing a lot of attention and even making it to online news. To avoid causing trouble for Grace by exposing her identity to the public, Bobby decided not to disclose much about her and chose to live in a condominium close to my house. Thanks to that, Grace wasn't bothered by Bobby's fans and could live a peaceful life. A year after their marriage, they were blessed with a child, whom they named Emily. After the baby was born, Bobby actively participated in childcare, and when he posted about it on social media, he became even more popular, leading to more promotional offers from companies. Grace, at Bobby's suggestion, quit her job to become a housewife and took care of the household and childcare. Whenever she had questions about these unfamiliar tasks, she would come to me for advice, and I felt happy to see her growth up close. However, as Bobby's work got busier and their home became more affluent, Grace began to feel that Bobby's attitude towards the family was becoming distant. Grace would visit me to talk about her worries, but at that time, I would tell her that it was only natural for someone to become busy with work, just as my late husband had. When work settles down, Bobby will return to his old self. Let's focus on the household for now, and I'll help you. Yeah, you're right. He will return to normal. At that time, I couldn't see the depth of Grace's feelings. That's why I carelessly uttered those words without any real basis. 6 months had passed since Grace first came to me with her concerns. We used to have regular video calls with Grace, Emily, and me whenever we had the time, enjoying conversations and hearing about Emily's growth, but that had gradually stopped due to their busy schedules. One day, something urgent came up, and despite being asked to call before visiting, I went to Grace's house without prior notice. I'm sorry for coming suddenly. I had an urgent matter. No, it's fine. When I visited their home, I noticed something odd about Grace and Emily's behavior. Sensing that something was off, I didn't ask any questions and was about to enter the house when Bobby came out of the living room with a guilty look on his face. Francis, I've always told you to call before coming over. I sometimes work from home. I'm sorry, I forgot to call because it was urgent. I'll make sure to remember next time. Bobby frowned and went back to the living room to resume his work, and we finished our business in another room to avoid disturbing him. Then, we spent some time together as a family for the first time in a while. In the time I hadn't seen her, Emily had grown even more adorable, and her sweet smile was almost too bright for my old eyes. Grace, too, looked more like a mother than ever before. After about an hour of talking, Bobby knocked on the door and said, "I'm going out," and left. I've finished my business, so I should head home. There are other things I need to do. Okay, Mom? Just as I was about to leave, Grace hesitated as if she wanted to say something. Yes? What is it? No, I'll talk to you if I have any more problems. I left, still feeling the unease from earlier, but I didn't ask them anything more and went on to my next task. On the bus, I saw Bobby's social media post. It was a picture of a happy family, completely different from the tense atmosphere I had felt earlier. Seeing the post, I naively thought they must have had a minor argument before I arrived and made up afterwards. This assumption was proven wrong a week later on a night when strong winds rattled the windows, and a loud noise echoed through the house. I had just finished dinner alone and was getting ready for bed while watching my favorite drama on TV when suddenly, I heard a loud banging on the front door. With the wind blowing hard outside, at first, I thought it was some trash being blown against the door. But the knocking continued, clearly not just debris hitting the door. To check what was going on, I quickly put on a light jacket, changed from slippers to sandals, and walked to the door, asking, "Who is it?" without opening it. Then, from the pitch-black, stormy night outside, I barely heard a voice saying, "Grandma." I had heard this voice before. In fact, I was certain there was no way I could be mistaken. It was Emily's voice. As soon as I opened the front door, I saw Emily standing there, tears streaming down her face. I quickly pulled her into the house to shield her from the strong night wind and calmed her down before asking what had happened. It was clear that something urgent had brought her to my house alone at such a late hour. Even though I was worried about her little body being out in the strong wind, I wrapped her in a blanket to warm her up and listened to her story.
Emily, what happened? Why are you here alone at this hour? Where's your mom?
Mom isn't moving. She collapsed. Emily's trembling voice managed to get those words out. Upon hearing that, I couldn't sit still and drove Emily to Grace's condominium to check on her. When we arrived, Emily used her key to open the entrance lock, and we rushed to their apartment, banging on the door. I thought that maybe Grace had woken up during the time Emily had come to my house. But after knocking several times, there was no response from inside. Emily used her key, and although I felt bad about entering without permission, I couldn't afford to think about that now, worried about Grace's safety. Following Emily's lead, I hurried to the living room, where we immediately saw Grace lying on the floor.
Grace? Grace! Emily, where's your dad?
In this situation, there was no way her husband, Bobby, wouldn't be around. Dad hit Mom, then left the house, saying she'd wake up soon. Then he went to work. Hearing that, a shock like lightning ran through my body. Although many thoughts crossed my mind, I was primarily worried about Grace's condition, so I quickly called an ambulance. At the hospital, the doctors found that Grace had suffered a severe head injury likely caused by the fall, resulting in internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. Grace was taken to the operating room, and the surgery was expected to take several hours. The red light outside the operating room cast a dim glow in the dark hospital, making my and Emily's hearts churn like a stormy sea. Several hours later, Grace was brought out on a gurney, accompanied by doctors and nurses. Emily and I stood there, stunned. The surgeon informed us that while the surgery was successful, Grace was still in a critical condition, hovering between life and death. As we watched Grace being moved to her hospital room, a mix of emotions overwhelmed us, but I decided to try contacting Bobby. However, despite repeated attempts, I couldn't reach him, so I stayed by Grace's side for several days, while Emily continued to go to school from the hospital. The nurses noticed the odd situation of a patient whose chart indicated 2 parents, but only one was present, but they didn't pry into our private matters. Still, I couldn't get in touch with Bobby. Eventually, I managed to get in direct contact with Bobby a few days after Grace was hospitalized. Amidst my numerous voicemails, he must have heard one and showed up at the hospital, feigning concern in front of the nurses. However, despite being at the hospital, he showed no real concern for Grace's condition, only speaking to her briefly, acting so indifferent that it was hard to believe he was her husband.
Bobby, are you really here because you're worried about Grace, or is there something inconvenient that you're worried about if she wakes up?
Without flinching, he coldly responded. She hurt herself. Leaving me in disbelief. Why? Because Emily's testimony clearly indicated that Bobby was responsible. There was no way pure-hearted Emily would lie. Even if she had lied, she had nothing to gain from it, and considering she had braved the storm to come to my house for help, it was clear she was telling the truth.
I've called you repeatedly, but you didn't return any calls. Where have you been while Grace is in this state?
When I pressed him, Bobby sighed as if annoyed and pulled out a notebook and a business card holder from his bag. The notebook was filled with times and places, detailing exactly where he had been on the night Emily came to my house. That night, Bobby had been out dining with fellow influencers. For several days, he had been attending networking events and gatherings with influencers who had more followers and fame than him. Additionally, it came to light that Bobby had been hiding many things. He had bought expensive equipment for filming his social media content and high-end accessories and clothes to avoid being overshadowed by other influencers at networking events. Receipts for these purchases were found. Realizing he couldn't hide it any longer, Bobby began to confess everything he had been hiding, including the circumstances that led to Grace's collapse. He revealed that the costs of buying accessories and equipment had spiraled out of control, and despite earning from sponsored posts, he had secretly taken loans from a finance company, leading to arguments when Grace found out. There had been continuous arguments about social media and debt, and Bobby's attitude towards Grace and Emily had become increasingly harsh. While his social media posts depicted a happy family, the reality was vastly different, creating a significant emotional rift. On the day Grace collapsed and Emily came to seek help, Grace had pleaded with Bobby to quit social media to save their family, but he had lashed out violently and then went to a networking event. It wasn't just that. Dad kicked her when she grabbed his leg while she was down, shouting, "Let go." Emily's further revelations added to the secrets Bobby had already confessed. He instinctively tried to cover Emily's mouth to stop her from saying more, but a male nurse in the room restrained him. The doctor, deeming it dangerous for Bobby to act out, instructed the nurse to call the police, and a few minutes later, Bobby was taken into custody. Following this, with my accompaniment, Emily provided a detailed account of the events to the police, leading to the case being officially treated as a domestic violence incident. Although not reported by the media, Bobby was effectively forced into a hiatus from his activities. While he ceased his social media updates to contain the situation, I felt it was necessary to expose the truth to the public. I bought a phone for Emily and suggested she reveal Bobby's true nature herself. Initially, I considered going to the media, but I feared it would infringe on Grace and Emily's privacy. Instead, I sent a disclosure letter to the companies that had sponsored Bobby. The effect was immediate. Bobby received numerous inquiries from sponsors, and once they confirmed Emily's revelations were true, their trust in him plummeted. Already under mental strain from police questioning, Bobby was devastated when companies started demanding compensation for breach of contract. His social network and connections crumbled, and Bobby cursed his actions. Emily and I visited the hospital every day, desperately trying to bring Grace back from the brink of death. We believed that if we kept talking to her, she would eventually wake up. We prepared changes of clothes and kept talking to Grace, believing she would wake up someday. One day, after finishing all the household chores in the morning, Emily and I headed to the hospital, as her school was also on break. We had become familiar faces to the receptionists. As we rode the elevator to Grace's hospital room, we heard voices from inside. Curious, we entered to find Grace awake, cheerfully talking to a nurse. Seeing Grace awake, Emily forgot she was in a hospital and ran to her, crying tears of joy as she hugged her recovering mother.
Mom, I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Mom, Emily. I'm sorry for worrying you. But I'm okay now. I heard Emily helped me. Emily is my hero, thank you.
I was so worried, Grace.
Mom, thank you so much for taking care of Emily too. Emily and I hugged Grace tightly, vowing never to let something like this happen again, and explained everything that had occurred while she was unconscious. But there was no need to say much. Grace had already made up her mind. Bobby needed to understand that everything he did would come back to him. Grace filed for divorce and demanded substantial alimony as a victim of domestic violence. In exchange for never seeing Emily again, she demanded a significant increase in child support, further inflating Bobby's debt, which had already soared due to the breach of contract fines. Having inflicted violence and publicly lied about his family, Bobby had brought this upon himself. Grace threw the divorce papers at Bobby as he was being taken into police custody, ending their marriage. Later, the divorce papers, properly filled out and signed by Bobby, were sent back to Grace, officially ending their marriage and making them strangers. Since Bobby had rented the apartment under his name, Grace and Emily moved in with me once Grace had recovered. Fortunately, I had plenty of room to spare. Grace took one of the 2 available rooms as her own, and Emily moved into the room Grace used when she was a child. They often talked about Grace's childhood, bringing laughter and joy. As for Bobby, he paid his bail but lost all credibility. Having built his career as a family-oriented influencer, he couldn't continue his work after the divorce and was left despondent. He tried to get a job in corporate PR using his influencer skills, but his bad reputation had already spread, and he was turned down at every interview. Once living a luxurious influencer life, Bobby now faced poverty and even came to my house, seeking help. However, we decided we had no obligation to help him and called the police when he wouldn't leave. As the police took him away again, his figure seemed much smaller than the man who once flaunted his wealth and status. We might not live as luxuriously as before, but the 3 of us vowed to support each other and live even happier lives together.
You are really useless as a woman. You have no value if you only give birth to girls. Do you understand that? What?
During dinner, Shane's sudden outburst made me drop my fork. Sure, we have 3 children, all girls. But I never thought I'd be told I had no value because of that.
You should be ashamed that you can't even provide an heir. What is this all about suddenly?
Shane's verbal abuse towards me only intensified. For Shane, the most important thing was for me to give birth to a boy, and that was all that mattered.
At this point, there's nothing left but for you to leave. You should be grateful for all the care I've given you up until now. I don't recall you ever taking care of me.
His one-sided accusations made me fight back.
What are you talking about? You can live like this thanks to me. Don't get it twisted.
Who's the one getting it twisted? I became a housewife because Shane insisted on it. He interprets everything to suit his convenience. That's the kind of man Shane is.
If you think I have no value, what do you want me to do? Ideally, you would leave immediately, but that would be too harsh, so find somewhere to go by tomorrow before I get home.
Honestly, I had been considering divorce, and maybe now was the time.
By the way, I've already found someone who can give me a son.
6 months later, the woman Shane mentioned gave birth.
Why are you calling me?
The baby's arm. Shane was at a loss for words, filled with despair. Sensing his despair, I started my revenge. My name is Sabrina, a 42-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Shane, and our 3 daughters.
I was thinking of starting work next month. What? Why? There's no need for that. We can't afford extracurricular activities at this rate, right? That's unnecessary. I just want to let them do what they love. And I can earn the money for that, so it's no problem, right?
I pressed on for our daughter's sake. But Shane refused to agree. Moreover, Shane started asking me to take care of his parents.
My dad is getting old, so you need to visit regularly to take care of them. Wait a minute. The kids are still young. I can't go there often. So you're saying you don't care what happens to my dad? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's physically hard. You should go instead.
Shane began shouting.
You should just do as you're told and not talk back. Don't raise your voice so much. You're scaring the kids. So what? That doesn't matter.
The kids, terrified by Shane's attitude, started crying. Instead of comforting them, Shane grew more irritated.
Shut them up. They're too noisy. It's your fault they're crying. Don't talk like that.
Ignoring me, Shane stormed out of the house. It started after our first child was born. Shane had wanted a boy ever since we got married. After the second and third girls were born, Shane lost interest. He kept saying he needed an heir. But Shane's family is just a regular family. This situation was because of his parents' influence. What, a girl? These were the words Shane's parents said when they first saw our daughter. I'll never forget that shock. Since that day, I have disliked my in-laws. But that wasn't all. I heard from Shane that you'd help take care of us?
I told him it would be difficult with the kids.
They're just girls, right? You promised, so you need to come.
But even so,
if you had given birth to a boy, things would be different. The gap between me and Shane's family grew wider. Even after that, I kept getting demands from Shane and my in-laws. Eventually, I found some time and went to my in-laws' house. I left the kids with a friend. Unfortunately, my in-laws' house is only a 15-minute drive away.
Sabrina, welcome. You finally made it. Come on in. Yes.
Veronica, my mother-in-law, welcomed me warmly.
Here, have some snacks. A friend gave them to me. Thank you.
Nothing strange happened, and I enjoyed my time there. 2 hours passed at my in-laws' house. Oh, you're here.
Yes, just visiting.
My father-in-law, Todd, returned home.
Well, Veronica, shall we?
Yes. Then Veronica stood up and said something surprising. You've enjoyed yourself enough, right? Now it's time to work.
What do you mean?
Just what I said. You came here to help us today. Veronica then treated me like a housekeeper. I had to do cleaning, laundry, and even cooking. Shane said it was caregiving, but they seemed quite healthy to me. Next, it was Todd's turn. Sabrina, can you help me with something?
What is it?
Can you wash my back?
What? My shoulder hurts a bit.
Please. This was sexual harassment. Wanting to go home quickly, I decided to comply. But Todd's request wasn't that simple. Why are you still dressed?
Washing your back doesn't require undressing.
Of course it does.
Take your clothes off.
I can't do that. We argued for a while until Veronica came in. What are you doing?
Todd asked me to undress.
Did he say that? Todd quickly turned the tables on me. Do you think I'd say that?
She tried to seduce me.
What?
I didn't think you were that terrible. Trying to seduce Todd because your husband ignores you. I didn't do that.
But my words weren't believed, and I was blamed. In the end, I was sent home. I picked up the kids and returned home to find Shane waiting.
It seems you caused quite a scene.
I quickly realized what Shane was talking about.
That's a misunderstanding. Why did I marry such a woman? That's not true. Making excuses at this point is embarrassing.
No matter what I said, Shane wouldn't listen. In the end, Shane kept blaming me and then said something troubling.
If you're going to do that, you won't mind me doing the same, right? What are you talking about? That's none of your business.
With that, Shane laughed and went to the bedroom. I went to the kids' room to put them to bed. Shane came back and said,
Go to my parents' place again next week.
They asked for you.
After what happened? Exactly. Go apologize. Now, I'm going to bed.
I stared at my daughters, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to go back to my in-laws' house. After what happened, I couldn't understand why they wanted me back. But fearing what might happen if I didn't go, I decided to go. The following week, I left the kids with a friend and went to my in-laws' house.
We've been waiting. We'll forget about last time. What? There's a lot to do today. If you help with everything, it'll be fine.
I thought it was a small price to pay to end things. But it was part of Veronica's plan.
Got it.
Come with me. Veronica led me to a room that seemed like a storage area. Though I'd been to their house before, I didn't know this room existed.
Please organize and clean this room.
With that, Veronica locked the door.
What are you doing?
To make sure you don't escape.
I'll let you out when you're done.
Good luck. The room was about 125 square feet, filled with cardboard boxes and other clutter. I got to work immediately, trying to clean up as quickly as possible. After about an hour, I checked my smartphone and saw the time. I decided to take a short break and sat down. Why did Shane marry a woman like her, anyway?
Well, she does have a pretty face. If only she had given us a boy.
Todd, that's all you ever talk about. It's annoying. Yeah. Anyway, we should use her as much as we can. I clenched my fists. I knew they didn't think highly of me, but hearing such awful thoughts made me furious. I worked even harder to finish and get out of that room. 3 hours later, I finally finished cleaning. I knocked on the door to be let out.
I'm done cleaning. Can you let me out now?
Are you really done?
Yes. I did everything you asked.
I heard the sound of locks being opened. As I looked at the door, it was more complicated than a normal key. The door had multiple padlocks hanging from it. Seeing that made me feel scared.
The room looks much cleaner now.
Thanks for your help.
It's getting late, so I'll be going now.
As I started to gather my things, Veronica grabbed my arm. Who said you could leave?
Isn't it over?
What are you talking about?
The day is just beginning.
The nightmare was far from over.
Is there more?
You only cleaned one room.
Next, I need you to clean the bedroom. Are you going somewhere?
Yes.
Shane invited me to dinner. I wasn't told anything.
Well, have fun. My in-laws left, leaving me behind. I had no idea when they would return. Worried about my daughters, I called my friend.
Sorry, it's taking longer than expected.
Can you watch them a bit longer? No problem, but... My friend's response was hesitant.
Is something wrong? I wasn't sure whether to tell you, but...
When we went to the park after you left, we saw Shane with a young woman.
Are you sure?
They looked really happy together. I'm sure it was him.
I see. Thanks for telling me.
I couldn't stay at my in-laws' house any longer. I rushed out. I headed straight to my friend's house. I didn't care about my in-laws anymore. You're back already?
Yeah. I'm done being used by them. And after what you told me.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you for telling me. It actually helps my plan.
Plan?
Yes, I've been planning to divorce him eventually.
After chatting with my friend, I went home. A few hours later, Shane returned.
Why are you here? The kids got sick, so I brought them home quickly. Make sure you take care of them properly.
Shane continued to talk down to me. In the past, I would have felt defeated and guilty, but not this time. I remembered what my friend had told me and silently vowed revenge. Shane started coming home late more frequently. I became suspicious and asked him about it.
You've been coming home late a lot lately. Is work that busy? Yeah. A colleague messed up, and I have to fix it. I see.
I also mentioned what my friend saw.
By the way, my friend said she saw you at the park with a young woman.
Park? I wouldn't go to that big park. There's no reason to.
You're right. It must have been a mistake. Sorry for asking something weird.
Seriously. Don't ask stupid questions. I'm busy. But Shane made a mistake. From that conversation, I was sure Shane had been at the park. I decided to gather evidence that he couldn't deny. I had limited means, so I hired a private investigator. It was at that moment. While shopping, I decided to take a route through a part of town I usually avoid.
Is that?
I saw a familiar face passing by. In a moment of shock, I stood still. When I followed, I saw them enter a hotel. The man looked too much like Shane. The woman looked to be in her 20s. She was dressed in a flashy way that seemed mismatched for Shane. A week later. Here are the results of the investigation.
Thank you. So, what did you find?
Following him was quite easy. He didn't try to hide.
I see.
Looking at the photos the detective took, I saw the woman I had seen before. It was definitely Shane. I waited for the right moment to confront him. I didn't confront him immediately because a part of me still hoped Shane might change. Even though he was a terrible man for cheating, he was still the father of my 3 daughters. While I was thinking about that, it happened.
You're really useless. You have no value if you only give birth to girls.
Do you get it?
What?
During dinner, Shane's sudden outburst made me drop my fork. Sure, we have 3 children, all girls. But I don't deserve to be told that.
You should be ashamed that you can't even provide an heir. What is this all about suddenly?
Shane's verbal abuse only intensified. For Shane, the most important thing was for me to give birth to a boy, and that was all that mattered.
At this point, there's nothing left but for you to leave. You should be grateful for all the care I've given you up until now. I don't recall you ever taking care of me.
His one-sided accusations made me fight back.
What are you talking about? You can live like this thanks to me. Don't get it twisted.
Who's the one getting it twisted? I became a housewife because Shane insisted on it. He interprets everything to suit his convenience. That's the kind of man Shane is.
If you think I have no value, what do you want me to do? Ideally, you would leave immediately, but that would be too harsh, so find somewhere to go by tomorrow before I get home.
Honestly, I had been considering divorce, and maybe now was the time.
If you think that way, I'll leave. But don't think I'm just going to walk away quietly.
What? I pulled out the evidence of his affair that I had hidden.
If I'm leaving, I'll make sure to get alimony and child support from the divorce. When did you?
It doesn't matter. I don't need to tell you. I quickly packed up my and my daughter's belongings. I'll pay whatever.
Just get out of my sight.
Don't worry, I will. I left the house and headed to my parents' place. Right now, they were the only ones I could rely on. I hadn't been in much contact since I got married, but I had no choice.
Why are you here with so much luggage?
I have my reasons. Can I put the kids to bed first and talk later?
Sure.
After putting the kids to bed, we gathered in the living room. I explained everything to my parents, and they understood.
Are you going to be okay?
I've thought it through. I think I'll be fine.
Stay here as long as you need.
Thank you. Later, I went to see a lawyer to discuss the divorce and getting alimony and child support. During this time, my in-laws called, saying they didn't want to be involved. I was busy with all the paperwork, and 2 months flew by. I successfully received alimony and child support from Shane and his mistress through the divorce court.
This should give us some stability.
However, Shane didn't have that much money, so he had to rely on his parents. Despite saying they didn't want to be involved, my in-laws reluctantly agreed to cover it. The lawyer who visited them told me. They looked bitter, but considering how they treated me, it was only fair.
So, is this finally over?
Yes.
I might need your help from time to time, Mom. Don't worry about it. We're happy to have our granddaughters with us.
I was not living a luxurious life, but with the support of my parents, I was able to live peacefully. Both my daughters and I were gradually getting used to life without Shane. One Sunday afternoon, I received a sudden call from Shane. At first, I ignored it, finding it bothersome to answer. But the phone kept ringing. Thinking it was becoming a nuisance, I decided to answer.
Finally, you answered. You should have picked up sooner. What do you want?
Well, a baby was born. I felt nothing upon hearing this.
Did you call just to tell me that? I'm busy. I'm hanging up. Wait. That's not it. What do you want to say?
Unlike when I first answered, Shane now sounded desperate. The baby's arm.
What do you mean?
I thought it was going to be a boy. Shane was in despair, unable to form complete sentences. Judging by his tone, the baby must have been a girl. For someone who always wanted a boy, it must have been quite a disappointment. I almost laughed. Shane started to explain. She lied to me. She said it was going to be a boy, but it turned out to be a girl. It seems the mistress knew Shane wanted a boy and lied to him about it. I thought it was incredibly foolish of her. She should have known that once the baby was born, the truth would be revealed. Shane couldn't accept that the baby was a girl and tried to break up with her. But the mistress resisted, and now things were out of control.
Sounds like you're in a tough spot.
Yes.
I knew you'd understand. I'm not happy hearing that from you.
Don't say that.
Can I hang up now?
Wait. Can we start over?
What?
His request was baffling and made me angry. Why would I do that?
You chose her over me, remember? And didn't you say a woman who can't bear a son is worthless?
I did say that, but I realize I was wrong. How convenient for him to say that. Just because things don't go his way, he thinks he can do whatever he wants. I laughed bitterly.
Who would take you back? I haven't forgiven you for what you did.
I spoke to Shane with anger. But Shane persisted. It was getting tiring, so I decided to change the subject. By the way, Whitney, right?
How do you know that name?
Did you forget? I investigated you too.
So what?
Do you know who she really is?
What?
When I hired a detective, I learned the truth about her. Shane probably didn't know.
Did you know she's married?
What are you talking about?
She's currently separated, but she hasn't divorced yet. She never told me that. Maybe she couldn't.
I don't know. Shane's voice trembled with anger.
Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because it's not my concern. Don't joke with me.
Say what you want.
I also know where her husband is. What are you going to do?
Wait and see. With that, I hung up. I immediately contacted Whitney's husband with the information I got from the detective. I explained the situation and suggested he sue for infidelity. It seemed he was looking for a reason to divorce her and thanked me. 2 weeks passed. I think it's time to move out.
Really? You're welcome to stay longer. I know, but I can't rely on you forever.
Then the doorbell rang.
Oh. Who could it be?
Mom went to check the door. But she didn't come back for a while. Instead, I could hear voices under an argument. Mom, what's going on? I went to the door and felt a cold sweat seeing who was there.
So, here you are.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to take my daughters back.
What?
Because of you, things got really bad. Whitney's husband showed up and sued us. Now we have to pay alimony and child support.
It seemed my plan had worked. They were on the path to bankruptcy.
My family has suffered because of you.
That's not my concern. What happened to Whitney?
She disappeared after her husband found out about the affair.
Whitney had been caught cheating by her husband and left Shane. All Shane was left with were the payments for alimony and child support from the divorce court.
Mom, enough. We're here for the kids.
Right. Let's go. With that, the three of them started to push their way into the house.
What do you think you're doing? Move aside.
With that, Shane shoved me. I couldn't brace myself and fell to the floor. Raising 3 kids alone must be too much for you. Let us take over.
I'm not handing my daughters over to you. Besides, I have full custody. This is kidnapping. Shut up. Stay out of this.
I asked Mom to call the police while I struggled to fend them off. I couldn't let these crazy people take my daughters. Soon, police sirens blared in the distance.
You're not getting away now. You!
Shane raised his hand to strike me. But 2 police officers grabbed him firmly.
Who are you? Let go of me.
It was futile. Shane and his parents were escorted to the police cars. As they were taken away, they glared at me. I smiled back at them. Finally, I felt like peace was within reach. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't expect it to come to this.
But we managed. What a horrible family.
The 3 of them were given restraining orders. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. As I had told Mom before, I decided we needed to move. Because of those 3. You never knew when they might try to take my daughters again.
Are you sure about this?
Yes. I can't stay here and risk our safety. And I need to protect my daughters and you.
Visit us whenever you can.
I will. I was worried about the constant changes for my daughters. But they seemed excited about moving to a new place. So, we moved. I thought peace had finally arrived, but...
Hey! You moved, didn't you?
So what?
I can't have people like you around. I'll find you no matter what. If you do, you might end up in jail. If you're okay with that, go ahead. You'll regret this.
I doubt it. I hung up and blocked his number. After that, Shane never tried to contact us again. I heard from others that Shane and his parents had become the talk of the neighborhood and had to move as well. Unable to pay the alimony, they were working desperately to make ends meet. They would probably live their lives being whispered about. By the way, about that strange thing I mentioned before. Oh, that? Don't worry. It's all resolved. Really? Yes, relax. I'll bring the girls to visit you soon. I planned to visit the friend who had set everything in motion and thank her. Now, I could look forward to a bright future with my daughters. I want a divorce.
What?
Please, leave the house right now.
Wait a minute, what are you saying? What do you mean all of a sudden?
I've already made up my mind.
Made up your mind? What do you mean by that? Explain your reason.
The reason is me. Just as those words were spoken, my twin sister Chloe walked into the room with a smug look on her face, looking down at me triumphantly. What on earth is going on? This makes absolutely no sense.
Ryan and I are getting married.
When I looked at my husband Ryan's face at Chloe's words, Ryan looked away from me without changing his expression. Is this a dream? I can't believe something like this is actually happening. I've heard stories about sisters taking each other's husbands or boyfriends, but I always thought those were just stories in dramas or movies. I am Susan, a housewife who has been married for 10 years. I have a twin sister, Chloe. We are identical twins, so our faces should look exactly the same, but the impression people get of us is quite different. Chloe is the picture of health, while I have been prone to illness and physically weak since childhood. People often say that twins catch colds and run fevers at the same time, but that wasn't the case for us. Even when I had a fever, she would be playing energetically. In gym class, while I was often sitting out due to poor health, Chloe never once had to sit out. Maybe that's why she is bright and proactive, while I am shy and passive. My parents took care of me a lot when I was little, but as my bad health continued, they gradually became more and more annoyed.
Mom, I feel really tired.
Again?
I gave birth to you and Chloe the same way, so why are you two so different? You're really a lot of trouble.
I'm sorry.
Go lie down in your room. Don't cause any more trouble.
Okay. I could feel that Mom was starting to see me as a burden. On our birthdays, only Chloe got a cake. I understand it was because I would get stomach aches from eating dairy, but it still hurt to watch Chloe blow out the candles and celebrate alone on our shared birthday. As we grew older, Chloe was given more priority. Mom would dress her in cute clothes, but I only got plain, cheap ones.
Susan is skinny and frail, so nothing looks good on her. It's a waste to put her in cute clothes.
When the family went out, Chloe always went along, but I was almost always left behind.
Susan gets sick easily, so it's no fun to take her along.
That's right.
Because of you, we always end up having to go home early or to the hospital. Susan, you're just exaggerating your condition to get everyone's attention, aren't you? I'm not doing that. But it's weird that you're so different even though you're twins.
Maybe there is some truth to that. You often hear stories about parents doting on their sick child and neglecting the healthy one, but in our case, it was completely the opposite. By the time I started middle school, it had become normal for the family to go out without me. Chloe gradually developed an attitude that it was only natural for her to be taken care of.
Susan, you're really unnecessary in this family. Dad and Mom said it would have been better if I was their only daughter.
I knew that I, who got sick easily and incurred medical expenses, had become a burden to my parents. Every time I had a fever, Dad and Mom would look at me with a face that said, again, and sigh. Even when I was with my family, I felt isolated, so I had come to find comfort in being alone, even if it was lonely. Since I couldn't do sports, I focused on my studies. But when I got better grades than Chloe,
you're so cheeky for someone like Susan. You should always stay in my shadow. Don't ever think about outshining me.
She would say things like that. Chloe always wanted to be in a superior position to me. By the time I entered high school, I rarely fell ill, but my family's attitude didn't change. After graduating from high school, Chloe went on to college, but I got a job and moved out. When I told my parents I was leaving, they looked visibly relieved. I was foolish to think they might ask me to stay. I realized then that I was nothing but a burden to them in that house. For the first time living alone, I bought myself a small cake with candles to celebrate my birthday. Happy birthday to me. From then on, I decided to live for myself. Whenever something good happened, I would celebrate it quietly like this. Fortunately, the company I joined wasn't very large, so it felt like a close-knit family. Everyone was kind. It was a packaging company that took orders from various industries and made products, essentially a subcontractor. The year I joined, I was the only new hire, so it felt more like a family than my actual family. Everyone gave me advice and worried about me living alone. Ryan worked at a packaging design company and often placed orders with us. Since I was always the one handling his orders, we naturally started talking more. One day, he asked me out to dinner. By then, I was already 23, but it was the first time a man had ever asked me out. Living in Chloe's shadow, I had come to believe that things like this just didn't happen in my life. I must have made a weird face out of shock. Seeing my expression, Ryan got really flustered.
Oh, sorry. If you don't want to, you can say no. I don't mind.
And so, we started dating. His parents divorced when he was a child, and he was raised by his mom. His dad was there when he was very young, but Ryan hardly remembers him. His dad wasn't family-oriented and rarely spent his days off at home. The only thing Ryan remembers is his parents arguing frequently. After the divorce, they lost contact, and his dad only paid child support for the first few months before disappearing. A few years after the divorce, his uncle informed them that his dad had died in an accident, but neither Ryan nor his mom attended the funeral. When I met Ryan, it had only been a short time since his mom passed away from illness. He would always smile fondly when talking about his mom. She must have been a wonderful person.
If Mom had met you, she would have been so happy. I'm sure you two would have gotten along great.
Listening to Ryan, I thought about how he had such a close relationship with his mom despite not having a dad. It made me tear up thinking about my own family. I thought I had moved past caring about my family, so the tears surprised even me.
Oh? What's happening to me?
Ryan then gently listened to my family story. I had never talked about my family to anyone before. So, my coworkers seemed to assume I didn't have a family, and I never corrected them. When I first moved out on my own, I informed my parents of my address and phone number, but 5 years have passed, and neither I nor my family have reached out to each other. 3 years into our relationship, he proposed to me, and for the first time in 8 years, I contacted my parents. Would they be surprised, perhaps a little happy? I still wondered.
Hello, it's Susan.
Oh, it's been a long time. I thought you might have gone to heaven. My mom laughed, but it wasn't funny at all. Was this supposed to be a joke? It didn't seem like the kind of joke a parent should make to their child. So, what is it? If you need financial help, we can't assist. We're not well off either.
It's not that. I'm getting married.
What? Really?
He wants to have a family meeting, so we plan to visit you soon.
Susan getting married, huh? I thought Chloe would get married first. Chloe always said she would marry a rich and handsome man, but it seems she hasn't found such a person yet.
Does Chloe not have any such plans?
Seems not. Well, unlike you, Chloe is cheerful and strong, so she doesn't need to rush. I see. My parents are still the same. Even when I said I was getting married, they didn't congratulate me or ask about my fiancé. It seemed they didn't care. But Chloe, upon hearing the news, contacted me immediately. Susan, you're getting married? Yes. Whoever chose you must not be much of a man. It's cheeky of you to marry before me.
Cheeky!
So, you're going to show off your fiancé?
That's not it.
Well, hurry and bring him over so I can inspect him. While I still hoped for some family blessing, my hopes were shattered. I thought they might congratulate us a bit when we met, that they might say something that made me feel like family again, so I took him to my parents' home. What a dork. That was Chloe's first comment upon seeing him.
Indeed. He seems quite plain.
Don't be picky.
Susan couldn't have landed a great catch.
Hey, that's rude.
I wondered what kind of man he'd be, but he's exactly what I imagined.
It was embarrassing. To think they'd make such rude remarks to their daughter's fiancé on their first meeting made me question their decency. I shouldn't have come. Why did I think they might celebrate with us? I should have known better. But still, I had foolishly hoped because they were my family. Ryan understood what kind of people my family was.
I apologize for being such a dull man.
Susan, shall we go?
Yes, let's.
The family meeting ended there. From now on, my family would only be Ryan. I resolved to live thinking this way. Married life was peaceful, and he was kind and always considerate. We both kept working, so we divided the housework as best we could, but Ryan was always better at it. Over the past 10 years, we didn't have children, but we were very happy. I thought Ryan felt the same way.
Divorce. What does this mean?
So, as I just said, Ryan is marrying me. Susan, you're in the way.
Sign those divorce papers and get out.
How could Chloe, who had been distant since that wedding introduction, be here now? What does she mean she's marrying Ryan? I can't keep up. I thought Ryan and I had a perfect marriage.
Why is Chloe here? Has Ryan been seeing her? Since when?
3-4 months ago, maybe? We'd bumped into each other by chance, and, well, here we are. You know, Susan, now that you're healthier, you really do look just like me. I thought the same thing when Chloe showed up. Even though we are identical twins, we looked different as kids, so people could always tell us apart. I've gotten healthier, and marriage brought a settled, peaceful life, which might be why. If we had the same hairstyle, no one could tell us apart. But that doesn't mean Ryan could betray me. It shouldn't matter that we look alike. Chloe used to laugh at Ryan, calling him a dork.
This has to be a bad joke, right? Chloe, you never liked Ryan.
Well, I didn't, but I'm divorced now and thinking about remarriage.
Chloe, you were married?
As if I'd stay single forever.
My ex-husband worked for a big company and was handsome, but he was so frugal he never let me spend any money, so I dumped him.
Chloe's high-pitched laugh is just like when we were kids. She always looked down on me with that laugh, the one I hated. That face made me avoid mirrors for a while. But after marrying Ryan, I started to like my face.
I'll make sure you get your fair share.
I don't care about that.
Then how about nothing?
No.
We have to sort this out properly to avoid future issues.
It seems like a waste, but whatever. Ryan has an inheritance, after all.
Inheritance?
I recall Ryan mentioning something about that last month. The lawyer contacted him because his dad's brother, his uncle, had passed away. His uncle was unmarried with no other family. So Ryan, as his nephew, was the heir. Ryan's uncle had some business ventures. That must be the inheritance. Is Chloe after Ryan for this? Does Ryan realize her intentions?
Chloe doesn't love you. She just wants your inheritance.
It's already decided. Ryan insisted on divorce, wanting it finalized quickly, leaving me in despair. It seemed pointless to argue. Living with Ryan, who betrayed me for Chloe, was unbearable. So, I divorced him, receiving alimony and a settlement. Ryan offered most of his savings as part of the division. It was much more than a typical settlement. Was this Ryan's way of showing sincerity? No amount could ease my pain, but work helped distract me. Then, 3 months after the divorce, I received news of Ryan's sudden death. I was still processing everything when I heard the news, and I was shocked.
No!
I couldn't believe it. The man I thought I'd spend my life with, who betrayed me for Chloe, was gone. I thought I could never forgive him, but I couldn't believe that the time we spent together was a lie. For the 10 years I was married to Ryan, I was truly happy. Even though it ended this way, I wanted to be there for him in his final moments. I was filled with the desire to spend that last time together. The news of Ryan's death came from the lawyer who handled our divorce and the division of our assets. The lawyer told me to attend Ryan's funeral. But I was already divorced, and Ryan had remarried Chloe, so I wondered if I should go to the funeral. I told the lawyer as much, but he insisted that I come because he had something from Ryan to give me. When I showed up at the funeral, Chloe looked at me as if to say, "What are you doing here?" But she said nothing. Ryan, in the coffin, was so emaciated that it was hard to believe only 3 months had passed, but his face was surprisingly peaceful, which somehow reassured me. However, I noticed that Chloe didn't seem very sad. In fact, she seemed somewhat happy. She was probably excited because Ryan's uncle's inheritance would soon be hers. After all, that was her real motive. Still, I couldn't believe he would go to heaven so soon. Even as I looked at Ryan lying in the coffin, I couldn't believe it, but the funeral proceeded as usual. After the funeral ended, while relatives were still around, the lawyer handed me a will.
A will? Yes, Ryan entrusted me with this to give to you after his death. Wait. Why Susan? I'm his wife. This was the deceased's wish, so I must follow it.
Chloe looked a bit frustrated at the lawyer's words, but quickly composed herself. Fine.
It doesn't matter who the will is for. The inheritance goes to me, his only family.
She said this, looking down at me.
Hurry up and open it and read it.
I opened the will as Chloe commanded, and inside was the will and what seemed to be a letter. I decided to read the will first. The first line read, "I bequeath all the inheritance I received from my uncle to my wife." There didn't seem to be anything unusual, but the next part shocked me. Ryan's uncle's business had been declining for several years before he passed away, and by the time he died, it had nearly $5 million in debt. Of course, the house was mortgaged, and the personal assets were just debts.
No way!
Chloe, her parents, and the relatives who were present turned pale when they heard about the inheritance. I remembered that Ryan wasn't close with his relatives, yet many attended the funeral because Chloe had boasted to her parents about receiving a huge inheritance. The relatives had probably come hoping to benefit from it. But as soon as they learned it was just debt,
You said you'd share the inheritance once you got it.
they started complaining and left quickly.
What's going on? This isn't what we were told. Ryan told me there was $5 million in inheritance. Because that's what I heard from Ryan. Yes, there is. $5 million in debt. Debt is also an asset.
The lawyer replied calmly. Confused, I looked at the letter included with the will. Ryan was diagnosed with a terminal illness 6 months ago, and he struggled to tell me. During that time, he met Chloe. Her hairstyle and clothing were entirely different, so he knew it wasn't me, but she looked so similar that he couldn't help but stare. Chloe approached him.
Are you Susan's husband?
Ryan, wanting me to have a supportive family after he was gone, exchanged contact information with her, but Chloe blatantly tried to seduce him. Apparently, Chloe couldn't stand seeing me happy after her own divorce. She wanted to take Ryan away from me and laugh about it. Ryan played along and listened as she revealed that her parents had squandered their money and were pretending to be sick to get money from me. Even though she claimed to be estranged from them, Ryan knew my kind-hearted nature would make it hard for me to refuse if they asked for help. Around that time, we received news about my uncle's inheritance. It turned out to be nothing but debts, but Ryan saw an opportunity. He imagined me being unable to refuse my family's demands after his death. Ryan knew he had to handle things while he was still alive. He wanted to ensure I could live strongly on my own and not be exploited by my family. He also wanted to get back at his family, who only thought of themselves. Ryan divorced me, leaving almost all his money to me as part of the divorce settlement. He kept the fact that the inheritance was just debts a secret from Chloe and the others. He told them it would take months for the inheritance to be processed, and they believed him. Chloe continued to splurge, buying cars and a house. All in Chloe's name, with Ryan as a co-signer. They planned to use the inheritance money to pay off everything and then leave him. Ryan's letter detailed everything about his dealings with Chloe. Since he did everything as she wanted, now that he's gone, all they have left is debt. If Ryan had died while we were still married, my family might have come to me for money. And I would have given it to them. I probably would have, especially if they had said kind words to me. Even though I told myself they were no longer my family, I wouldn't have been able to ignore them if they were in trouble. Ryan knew my nature well. He sacrificed himself to protect me. As expected, Chloe contacted me afterward. "Susan, you can come back home now. Let's live together from now on. So you can make me pay off the house loan? We're going to live together, so it's fine." "No, thank you. But you got a lot of money from Ryan, right? You should give us some." "I don't care. We're drowning in debt. Can't you help us out? We're family." "We're not family anymore, and it's your own fault. Please. Dad and Mom have no money and are relying on me. Help us out, please. I have no obligation. Family is in trouble. Helping is only natural, right? I don't care. I'm not planning to have anything to do with you anymore. Do what you want. This is the last time I'm talking to you. Goodbye." I heard from a lawyer later that Chloe abandoned her inheritance and sold the house and cars, but still couldn't repay the debts. The whole family now works from morning to night, living in extreme poverty. I will never betray Ryan's wishes. But the desire to have spent his last moments with him never fades. Still, I know that he thought of me until the end. With that thought in my heart, I will live strongly from now on.